This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Hing.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Welcome to Spiritually Speaking with host Maryne Hachey, a transformative hour devoted to assisting you with overcoming obstacles that may be preventing you from achieving the life you desire. With channeled messages that cleanse, awaken your light body, and uncover limiting beliefs, Maryne will give readings and specific information to help you on your journey into self from your spirit guides, angelic realm, God, and loved ones that have crossed over. Maryne will answer questions on practical life applications of living your life outside the box as you step into your spiritual transformation. And now here's your host, Maryne.
Good morning. My name is Maryne Hachey, and you are listening to Spiritually Speaking. And today I have a very special guest, and his name is Garnet Schulhauser. He's a retired lawyer from my hood here in Canada. He lives in Victoria, BC, with his lovely wife, Kathy. And he's written a couple books. The first one was Dancing on a Stamp. And then the book we're going to be talking about today is Dancing Forever with Spirit. But before we get into that, I just want to tell you a little bit about it. So his book is the second in a series, and it's an adventure of the soul with a wise spirit guide disguised as a homeless man named Albert. And so welcome to the show today, Garnet. How are you?
Just fine, thanks, Maryne. How are you?
I'm so awesome. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
It's my pleasure to be on your show. I'm excited too.
Oh, good. So you met a homeless man named Albert, and so can you tell us about your first meeting with him?
Yeah, it was in 2007. I was still practicing law then, Maryne, and I was just taking a stroll down the street one sunny afternoon, and all of a sudden, seemingly out of nowhere, this homeless man appears, jumps right in front of me, stops me in my tracks. And he looked like a typical homeless man because he had stringy hair and scraggly beard and dirty slept-in clothes. But instead of making a sidestep to go around him, I just stood there transfixed because he had these amazing, dazzling, sparkling blue eyes. And they were doing two things. First, they seemed to be penetrating right into the depths of my very soul. And I felt like he knew everything about me, everything I'd ever said and done in my life. And this was unusual because we had never met before. But I didn't sort of bolt and run away because at the same time his eyes were sending me this wave of pure, unconditional love that was just infusing my whole body. It was an amazing sense of peace and security and well-being. So I was like a deer caught in the headlights. And I just stood there basking in the glow from this man. And I don't know how long I stood there. It was like I was in a time warp. But eventually he broke the spell by saying to me, "Why are you here?" Then he quickly disappeared into a nearby store. So when I collected my wits, I went into the store to try to find him, but he wasn't there anywhere. And there was only one entrance and one exit, and he hadn't come out, but he wasn't in the store. So I walked back out into the street, walked up and down for a few minutes trying to find him, but he had just disappeared into thin air. So that night, I resolved to myself that he was such an amazing individual that I had to find out more about him, and I had to find him. So I resolved to go back to that same street the next day, the very same time, and I did. And I appeared on the street. I went for a walk, walked up and down a few times, and after 15 or 20 minutes, just when I was about to lose hope, then I spotted him sitting on a bench all by himself. Yeah. So I walked up to him and I said, "Who are you, and why did you stop me the other day?" And he said, "I'm a soul just like you. I'm here to help you on your journey and answer all of your questions." So then my skeptical lawyer brain kicked in, Maryne, and I said to him, "Well, why do you think you can help me when you can't even help yourself? Because it looks like you've been sleeping on the street for weeks, and you smell like a dead fish."
Yeah.
So he just gave me this big smile, and he said, "Looks can be deceiving." Because he said, "You look like you're a very successful lawyer with everything under control, but we both know that's just a facade." So he said, you can turn around and go back to your office and see if you can find all the answers you've been seeking all these years in all those emails waiting for you on your computer, or you can sit down and chat with me. So luckily my intuition kicked in, and it said, I really need to sit down and talk to this guy because he's a very special person. So I did. And that began a series of conversations that we had over the next several months and ultimately led to my book, Dancing on a Stamp.
Wow, that is so amazing. Like I was telling you before we came on air, I've had a similar experience, and we'll talk later about that. I just want to get in as much as we can while I have you on the show. And so the first meeting, so we can set this stage for the amazing adventure that you had, can you explain to people what astral travel is?
Well, astral travel was really traveling in your spirit or soul form. So you basically, we all have a soul or a spirit. And when you astral travel, your soul or your spirit leaves your physical body and travels to wherever. You can travel elsewhere on the physical plane. You can go to the spirit side. You can go through many different dimensions. And so it's traveling in spirit form, really an out-of-body experience, as some would term it.
Yeah.
So that's what astral travel is.
It's so amazing. For myself, I remembered astral traveling at a very, very young age. And each time I would leave my body, I didn't really have control at that time. I would crash land in trees. I always seemed to enjoy flying. I flew lots of places. But as I got older, I was more fearful to step out of my physical body and venture out there, until, I had a really great spiritual awakening. So do you find that, astral travel is a unique gift as psychic mediums or intuitive people, and it's not something everyone can do, or do you feel everyone has the potential to astral travel?
I think everyone has the potential to astral travel. And in point of fact, Maryne, everyone does astral travel every night when we sleep. All humans, when they sleep, their souls leave their physical body. They travel over to the spirit side, except that we're not usually allowed to remember these trips. And so, but there are some people, humans, who can actually astral travel sort of at will and remain conscious and remember their trips. And obviously you've done it. There's been other people who can do it. I think everyone has the potential, but it's not easy to do. And in my case, I had never done it before until I met Albert. And then he just made it very easy for me. I didn't have to really work at it. He just sort of, in our first encounter in my bedroom, he just sort of reached out and basically grabbed my astral arm and pulled my astral body out of my physical body, and then he led me away. And so he was my tour guide, so to speak. I didn't have to worry about crashing into trees because he was sort of hanging onto me. And so I was never sort of out of control. He was always the tour guide, towing me behind him.
That's so amazing. Yeah, I love that. I kind of could have used Albert in my younger years, because there was a lot of neat things I was experiencing, but then I would just, I think my consciousness would start pulling me back, and then I would lose all control. I'd be crashing into the trees. I'd be grabbing the branches as I'm falling down, or, trying to jump from tree to tree, and it was very interesting. So how long were the visits in between, Albert, in the beginning?
You mean before I started the astral travels or after the astral travels?
Yeah, the first initial visit. Oh,
okay, well, he appeared to me in physical form as the homeless man for the first 3 times. And there was there was just a day between the first 2, and then there was about a week after that before his 3rd physical visit. Then after that, he didn't appear physically anymore. He just spoke to me as a voice in my head. So we communicated by telepathy. And so the times in between, it would vary. He would, he would sometimes, we'd have a conversation sort of a day after day, and then sometimes there'd be weeks in between. It really depended on sort of where I was in terms of my schedule, because I would usually summon him when I had some questions. But in the meantime, I was busy sort of taking notes about what we had discussed so I could write my manuscript. So it varied a lot. But the series of conversations for Dancing on a Stamp went on for several months. Then when we were finished, and in fact, early on, Albert said to me, you know what? I'm not just here to answer your questions, but I want you to write a book so that everyone else will have access to my revelations. And
that's so amazing.
That's why, and it was funny because it never occurred to me to write a book before. I was a practicing lawyer, had never thought about it. after he put that bug in my head, of course, it stayed with me, and he was very persuasive. I was reluctant at first, but he sort of kept at it in a very gentle manner until I finally threw in a towel and say, "Okay, I'm going to write your book, Albert." And then once I sort of got into that one, at some point he told me, "Well, it's not just one book; it's going to be like 4 or 5 books." And I sort of groaned and thought, "Oh no, what have I got myself into?"
Totally.
But anyway, it's worked out because I actually enjoy it, Maryne. And the first one was a struggle because I'd never written one before, and then the second one was easier than the first, and the third one, which isn't released yet, was easier than the first 2. So it's getting a little easier for me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially because, you work so much in the human form in your analytical mind. And so this is something that the human self can't really fathom a whole lot, especially being, so analytical. So can you tell me, during that time, was there a lot of resistance in the beginning to write the first book, to follow through with the guidance and wisdom?
Oh, absolutely, because it was, what's in my book, Dancing on a Stamp, was totally out of character for my most of my life, my career as a corporate lawyer, because I was very much of a button-down, straight-laced, stuffed shirt, typical corporate lawyer. And I never talked about spirituality or religion or anything else. And so I was concerned that if I sort of came out of the spiritual closet, so to speak, that I would, a lot of my former clients and law colleagues and friends would be very surprised, and some of them would think that I'd lost my mind. So I was concerned about that, because it's totally out of character for me. So I struggled with it, and even after I finished the manuscript, I still had thoughts of just throwing it in a drawer somewhere and just forgetting about it. But then I thought, if I didn't get it published, I would regret that for the rest of my life. So I went ahead and found a publisher, and you know what? I did lose some former friends and colleagues. But actually a lot of them were very supportive. And when I wrote the first book, I got some really nice comments saying, glad you had the courage to write that book, and good for you, kind of thing. So it was a bit of a mixed bag, but so I lost some people along the way. I gained a lot of new friends. The people, a lot of people who read my book I've gotten some really amazingly nice comments. So overall, I certainly don't regret it.
No, that's amazing. And so I'm so glad that you had the courage to write that book, to share that wisdom with other people as well. And that stands for all of us. We get this guidance and wisdom to do these things that, living life outside the box, where I know for myself, I've lost, even family members, because I'm staying true to what I feel guided to do. And it's so important when we get those messages to honor ourselves. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. And there's so many more people these days who are channeling spirit, like you are through your show. I do it through my books. A lot of other people are writing books or blogs or hosting, radio and TV shows or speaking publicly. And that's because spirit really wants to get the message out to as many people as possible. And so there's a whole lot more channels than there were, say, 20 or 30 years ago. 20 or 30 years ago, you probably wouldn't be hosting your show, and I wouldn't have written my books.
No. I look back in my early teens when I was, really experimenting with who I was as a psychic medium, and how much fear I had to honor my gifts and to really live out loud like I am now. I couldn't imagine doing what I'm doing right now back then at all.
No, I don't think it would have been possible. And if you had hosted the show, nobody would have listened to you. And just like Albert said, if I'd written my books, nobody would have read them back in the 70s or even the 80s probably. But there's so many more people who are spiritually aware and who are open-minded enough to tune into your show, read my books, and listen to all the other channels in the world.
Yeah, it's so amazing because there's such this widespread of awakening right now, for, people called into service in many, many different aspects of awakening. And I think it's just such a beautiful time to, be enlightened and to share the message and to embrace one another. So let's get into your second book. How did your second visitation differ from the first one? Like, where were you? Can you set that stage?
Sure. Well, I hadn't heard from Albert for a couple of months, and I was beginning to wonder if he had sort of just skipped out on me. And he had told me, of course, that I had to write my second book, but I needed his input, his wisdom. And so Then one night, I was sleeping in my bedroom, and something made me wake up, and I sat up in bed, and I looked towards the doorway. There was this ghost-like, ethereal figure standing in the doorway. And when it moved closer to the foot of my bed, I could see it was my old friend Albert, as in his homeless man disguise, but in astral form. Mm-hmm. And so I was surprised, and I said, "Hi, Albert, nice to see you. What's up this time?" And he said, "Well, I'm here to take you on a series of astral trips to show you things, to take you to the spirit side, to other planets in the universe, so that you could write about what you saw and who you talked to in your second book." And I was like a bit surprised, and I said, "Well, do I have to tell my wife where I'm going? And do I need a passport? Like, how do we do this?" And he just smiled and said, "No, you'll be back in your physical body before morning, and your wife will never know you've been gone." So then he just sort of reached out and literally pulled my astral body out of my physical body. I turned around and looked back, and my physical body was still sound asleep in bed. And he said, "Come on with me." And so he just sort of guided me. We just rose up through the ceiling, up through the clouds, and stopped for a moment at a high spot above our planet. And he let me turn around and look at our beautiful planet from that perspective, which was really breathtaking, because Earth was like a jeweled pendant hanging in or floating in the inky blackness of space. It was really quite a sight to see. I've never seen it from that perspective before. And I can see now why some of the astronauts, they describe some of their experiences and how amazing it is to see our planet from that perspective, because it's really it's a beautiful planet, and it really made me think we really have to do what we can to make sure this planet survives and continues and doesn't get destroyed by actions of humans or whatever. So then,
right.
So then after that, he just said, "Okay, come on, we're going to the spirit side." And there was this sort of a shimmering doorway, and he pulled me through that. And then all of a sudden on the other side, from what appeared to be just blackness, all of a sudden there I was standing in this incredibly beautiful meadow. And
that's so amazing. Before we get into the beautiful description that it's about to come, I'm so excited for this. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be discussing where the doorway led to Garnet's new adventure. Stay tuned to Spiritually Speaking. I'm your host, Maryne Hachey, with my special guest, Garnet Schulhauser.
Did you know that you can rate our shows on iTunes? Yep, you can share your thoughts about the topics, the hosts, and the special guests. You can also leave a suggestion. Then, when you're done, rate the show. The hosts love your feedback, and others appreciate it. So next time you download a show, take a second to leave your thoughts and rate it.
You're listening to Spiritually Speaking with Maryne Hachey. To learn more about Maryne or to book a healing session, go to MaryneHachey.com. That's Maryne, Maryne, Hachey, HACHEY.com. Or email readingsbymaryne@gmail.com.
In the magical tale, The Adventures of Robbie Robinson, author Maryne Hachey invites us into a fantasy world of fairies, goblins, and woodland creatures. Beautifully descriptive, the author takes you to a place of wonder and adventure where danger lurks in forbidden gardens. Woven through the story are some adult themes like life, death, and rebirth that is a big part of this coming-of-age story.
The Adventures of Robbie Robinson is available on Amazon, Chapters Indigo, and Barnes & Noble.
Welcome back to Spiritually Speaking. I'm your host, Maryne Hachey, and today we're speaking with Garnet Schulhauser about his second book, Dancing Forever with Spirit. So just before the break, we were talking with Garnet, and he's out in the astral plane, and he's just walked through this doorway into this meadow. Can you describe that, Garnet?
Right. Stepped through the doorway, and found myself standing in this amazingly beautiful meadow. It was like lush green grass and majestic trees and wildflowers everywhere in like 1,000 different colors. So many colors that I've never seen before on Earth. It was just hard to describe. And so it was an amazingly pleasant place, like sort of the best place you could ever hope for in your life to have a picnic. Mm-hmm. But anyway, we weren't there for a picnic because Albert had a mission for me. And so we strolled down the path and sort of up a low hill. At the bottom of the hill, I saw a group of people waiting for me. Or they seemed to be waiting for me anyway. And so as we walked down the hill towards them, then I began to recognize them. And my heart skipped a beat because there were my mother, father, my brother Brian, grandparents, and various aunts and uncles who had already passed over from the earth plane. So it was really sort of like a mini welcoming party for me. And even my little dog, Oscar, a miniature schnauzer, who had passed away about 10 years before, he came running from behind the pack towards me. His little tail was wagging his whole body. He was so happy to see me. It was great, except I had some misgivings initially because I didn't know how my mother would greet me or accept me because when she was living on Earth, she was a very staunch Roman Catholic lady. And she firmly believed that we had to follow all the rules of the church in order to get to heaven. And I knew that because in my book, Dancing on a Stamp, I was not kind to the Catholic Church. I took a lot of shots at it. So I wondered what she would think. And she came up to me, gave me a big hug and said, everything's okay. She said, if I was still living back on Earth, I wouldn't be very happy with you right now because of what you wrote in your book. But, and here's the big but, she says, now I'm on the spirit side. I can see the whole picture, and I agree entirely with everything you wrote in your book. So well done. So that was like sigh of relief. So then after warm hugs all around with them, Albert said, okay, we can't stay here forever. We got some things to do. So he pulled me away, and we walked towards this gleaming white city that he called Aglaia, off in the distance. And we strolled towards that city, went through the entrance portal, and then strolled down the main boulevard. And that was another amazing scene going down this boulevard.
Wow.
Because you want me to describe the boulevard?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
it's fascinating.
It was like I'd been dropped into the middle of a costume ball because the street was full of souls, spirits, but they were dressed in colorful garments from many different eras and countries on Earth. And it was sort of like, it was hard to describe. There's so many different kinds, and it was all very colorful. And the souls were all very happy. They were laughing or smiling or whatever, and involved in animated conversations. And I said to Albert, so what is this all about? And he said that souls on the spirit side can appear to others in any form they choose, and they can change it as often as they like. And so he says a lot of souls will appear in the garments from one of their favorite lifetimes back on Earth. And so that's why there was such a diversity of costumes and clothing and hairstyles and everything else, because they were just sort of picking something that they enjoyed from a previous life on Earth. But he said, some souls will just choose to appear as a globe of light, which is sort of our natural form. But he said, no matter however a soul appears to you, every soul is easily recognizable because we all have a unique energy signature. So it doesn't really matter what a soul is wearing. We can always recognize them immediately. So this is really quite interesting, and it was fascinating to stroll down this boulevard. But again, Albert didn't let me lollygag there very long, and we ended up in front of this big, tall, majestic white building with Grecian pillars lining the front. He said, "This is the Hall of Wisdom," and we went inside, and inside there was this big room with a high dome ceiling and a horseshoe-shaped table in the middle with 11 souls seated around it. And these people they all had snow white hair, very smooth, unwrinkled skin. They were all very regal-looking with gold robes with white sashes. And Albert said, "This is the Council of Wise Ones." And he said, "This is the group that's whose job it is to oversee all the incarnations on Earth." And so the chair of this council, her name was Sophia, welcomed me and said, "Thank you for coming. We asked Albert to bring you here because we have a message for you to send back to all of mankind."
And so what was their message? Like, this is so fascinating. I could actually, as you were describing it, I can actually like visually go there and physically see this. So I just got lost in the,
yeah, well, it was quite fascinating. Anyway, these are very wise souls, very advanced souls. And their message to me was this. They said, okay, humanity has reached a very advanced level of civilization right now on Earth. You have a very advanced technology, but humans have not kept up with their technology, have not kept pace with their emotional and spiritual intelligence. And that leads to a lot of strife and conflict and harm that happens on our planet because there's too many negative emotions that are running rampant, like fear and hate and anger and greed and so on. And that causes so many problems for humans. And they said that it's really incumbent on humanity right now because we're at a very crucial inflection point in our history. And they said that we have weapons of mass destruction that if unleashed, could destroy all life on the planet. What we need to do is we need to take the next step up the spiritual ladder. We need to increase our vibratory rates and expand our consciousness and eventually ascend towards the new earth in a higher dimension. And they said we need to do that before we destroy ourselves because they have watched in the past as other civilizations like Atlantis and Lemuria and a few others we've never heard of, they have reached a similar stage of advanced development, but they ended up crashing and burning because they weren't able to take the next step. And so they really don't want our civilization to end up in the same boat, and they want us to really to take the next step. And so their message is, look at, go back to Earth and do your best to spread the message that we need to embrace love and compassion and discard our negative emotions so that we can raise our vibrations and move up to the new earth. And so that was the message. Like they didn't give me a deadline or a time frame, but they said we're at a very crucial point. And so go back and do what you can. Spread the message, Albert's message, and he's going to take you to see a number of different things, some things on your planet where there's a lot of abuse going on, to other planets in the universe, and you're going to be able to see some things that are important for you to message back to your fellow humans in your second book. And so that was my mission. And I said, okay, I'm ready. Let's go, Albert. So that was their message. Like we need to get our act together before it's too late.
You know, that's really amazing. Clearly we're tuning into the same source energy. I mean, we all tune into the same pool. If we're really, listening to spirit, I often say, step aside, human, and let my soul drive. Because when my soul is driving, my human is less apt to get in my way and cause resistance. But I am always saying and encouraging people that there is no higher vibration than love. And so where love exists, nothing else can. So as long as we're coming to a place of love, everything else has to match us and to come to that point of love. And just really not judge each other. So I really love that you've touched on all these things that I really, really believe in. And, as humans, we really like to complicate our life, don't we?
Oh, overly so. Yes, we tend to do that, and what that does is it makes us more prone to letting our negative emotions get the better of us. Stress will lead to fear and anger and everything else, and it also means that when we're overly complicated with our lives, is that we don't hear the messages we get from spirit, from our spirit guides, and they're always sending us messages trying to get us to take the right path, the one that we had planned for ourselves before we were born. But when our minds are cluttered with a lot of things that, you've got your day job and you've got, work commitments and you've got timetables in your life, you tend to focus on those. You don't hear the messages from spirit, which we really need to focus on.
Yes, it is just kind of like leaving it all at the doorway and just learning to love each other without judgment and respecting one another's gifts where we're at. And so it's so important, like you did in the first book, having that courage just to be who you are, because something inside you, something above, is compelling you into this life of service. And so I'm so glad you obeyed that.
Yeah, I am too, actually. But it was going to happen anyway, because what I've learned is that you can't argue with spirit. If spirit has something intending for you, you can dig your heels in and you can try to resist. Eventually, they're going to win. So,
oh, totally.
I've learned that now, and so when Albert tells me that I'm going to do something, I say, "Okay, boss, lead the way.
Yeah, I know. I've had those life moments of the 2x4 taking me out because I wasn't listening.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, and sometimes they have to use a 2x4 to get your attention. But I've learned now to, rather than get whacked on the head, I just say yes right away, and away we go.
It's so amazing. Like, over the last few years, I've just been saying yes, okay, even if it doesn't make sense, because in my rational mind, a lot of this doesn't make sense because, my human was taught to, you have to, go to the 9-to-5 job. You have to punch a time clock. You have to follow the grid. If you get out of the grid, you're going to get lost. And so I've really learned to, kind of fly my freak flag because life is so much easier, and then it flows so much more freeing as a result of me being obedient to what I'm supposed to be doing. And then the messages are that much more powerful because I've got that clear connection.
No, absolutely. And if you can follow the path that's intended for you and listen to Spirit, you will feel much more in balance with your life. And your journey would be much happier, and you'll have a lot less stress and discourse in your life. That's really what we should all aspire to. And if the trouble is, as you said, is that our human minds, to pardon the pun, have a mind of their own, and so they want to head off in one direction and ignore what Spirit is saying. And we really have to learn to control our minds and quiet it down and stop it from rationalizing everything, because a lot of the times you get a message from Spirit and your mind says, well, that can't be right. That doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to do that. We have to stop that.
Totally. I know for myself, a matter probably 10, 15 years ago, I was instructed to stop watching TV and to remove it from my home. Just because it got in the way of me being obedient to my path and listening to Spirit and really striving to let the light shine through. What are some of the tools that you've used for yourself to stay on your path?
Well, I think meditation is one of the best ones, and I meditate regularly. I don't think I'm particularly good at it, but I do find that it does reduce the stress in my life. And I have a whole lot less stress now, of course, than when I was practicing law, but there still is some stress. But I just find it's very, I tend to glom on more to the messages from my other guides. Now, I should just explain. Albert communicates with me directly, but only for a very specific purpose, which is to give me some messages that I'm to take back to my fellow humans, through my books. But he won't give me personal advice. And so I have to listen to my other guides who don't communicate with me directly, just like everyone else, through, intuitive flashes of thought, whispers in my mind, gut feelings, coincidental events. Those are the kind of things that my other guides are giving to me to help me on my personal path, because Albert won't tell me what I should be doing. And he said, it's frustrating to no end, because he could so easily tell me exactly what I should do step by step. But he says that there'd be no purpose in that. You didn't come here to have an easy life. You came here to experience challenges and learn lessons, and I'm not going to take that away from you. So he won't give me that. So I have to sort of struggle like most humans to try to listen to my guides. And I do find that meditation is a good way to sort of be better at, it makes me better at listening and hearing and actually paying attention to the messages, because so often we get them and we're so busy we just sort of, we just brush by and we don't really focus on them, particularly coincidental events. We don't sort of pause to say, okay, what is this trying to tell me? What is the message here? And so I'm better at that. I mean, I'm certainly not perfect, but I get better every day, and I realize that, life on Earth is a challenge, and Albert's not going to make it easy for me.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's so interesting because we still have to work the processes. We're still, in human form, and we need to have these experiences, not just because this is something that we signed up for, but we get to pass these other experiences and wisdom that we've learned as humans to others that, are going through similar experiences, to give them hope to keep going, or just inspire them that, better things are coming their way. And so how has your wife, Kathy, dealt with all of this?
Well, she's been very good, and she's actually very spiritual herself. And I didn't tell her about my meeting with Albert for the longest time just because I was afraid of what she might say. I didn't tell my sons either. But when I did tell her, she was like, okay, that's good. she encouraged me to write my book, and she's been very supportive. She's actually had a few spiritual experiences herself, like not long after her father passed away, she actually had an experience where he appeared to her in a parking lot in a different form, but communicated with her. And then after her mother passed away, her mother also appeared to her and communicated with her. And so she's very much in tune with that. She understands it, and so it's just great. I have nothing but support from her.
I totally love that, and I also love you mentioned on several different interviews that just because we leave this physical form, we don't actually die, and I totally believe that. Just because of everything I've witnessed as a medium and during my own spiritual process, that they're very much alive over there.
Oh yes, for sure. And I was fully convinced of this just in my first dialogues with Albert, when he told me that, and what he said just rang true. I just made eminent sense, and I just totally believed it. But it was really demonstrated to me when I made that first astral trip to the spirit side, when I actually saw them there, and they were all. They looked like they were in robust health. They were smiling. They were very happy, and I knew that they were living a great existence. They were well looked after, and there was no worries about what happened to them. So that was an absolutely sort of that totally completed the picture for me. And I'd like to. It would be great if everyone on this planet could have that experience, because then everyone would know. Okay, when my physical body dies, I know where I'm going. I'm going back to a beautiful place in the spirit realm. And not to worry, because there's no judgment after you die, there's no punishment, and there is no hell. So everyone goes back to the same place. Yeah. And yeah. if you've made mistakes in this life, well, that's fine. That's just the way it goes. You can come back again and try to do better the next time.
Yes, I completely agree. So we're going to take a few minutes to take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion with Garnet Schulhauser on his book, Dancing with Spirit.
Did you know that you can rate our shows on iTunes? Yep, you can share your thoughts about the topics, the hosts, and the special guests. You can also leave a suggestion. Then, when you're done, rate the show. The hosts love your feedback, and others appreciate it. So next time you download a show, take a second to leave your thoughts and rate it.
You're listening to Spiritually Speaking with Maryne Hachey. To learn more about Maryne or to book a healing session, go to MaryneHachey.com. That's Maryne, Maryne, Hachey, HACHEY.com. Or email readingsbymaryne@gmail.com.
In the magical tale, The Adventures of Robbie Robinson, author Maryne Hachey invites us into a fantasy world of fairies, goblins, and woodland creatures. Beautifully descriptive, the author takes you to a place of wonder and adventure where danger lurks in forbidden gardens. Woven through the story are some adult themes like life, death, and rebirth that is a big part of this coming-of-age story.
The Adventures of Robbie Robinson is available on Amazon, Chapters Indigo, and Barnes & Noble.
Welcome back to Spiritually Speaking. I'm your host, Maryne Hachey, and today we're talking to Garnet Schulhauser about his book, Dancing Forever with Spirit, and his astonishing insights from heaven. I'm so excited, Garnet, to have you on the show. Like I said, repeatedly, you're just so amazing, and I'm really glad that you reached out and sent me your books, because they're truly amazing. They're really inspiring. So, what other things do you find that humans really, really struggle with on their spiritual journey?
Well, I think they struggle with sort of the trying to find an answer to the questions I always had, which Albert answered to me, like, who am I, why am I here, and what's my life purpose? We all we all ask those questions at one time or another. Mm-hmm. And I think that it makes life so much easier if we understand that we came here because we chose to come here. You know, we were on the spirit side before. We chose to come here. We developed a life plan before we came here, which set out sort of the major circumstances of our lives, like, you know, where we'd be born, the first language we would learn, the identity of our parents and siblings and other relatives. So we sort of set out a broad blueprint of what we wanted to experience, and we wanted to experience things that we felt were necessary for our evolution. So that's why we came here. And so, you know, if people realize that if they're not happy with their lives, you know, or something bad has happened to them, they have to realize that it wasn't the act of some capricious God that did it, or a random act of the universe.
Yeah.
It was they put themselves there. And they don't remember why they came here or chose their circumstances, but they had a very good reason beforehand. And when they physically die, when they cross back over, they will realize all those things. They will recall their life plan, and then they'll know why they did it. But right now, we're not allowed to do that. So if people realize that, then you will never feel like you're the victim, because you know, your life here is a result of your pre-birth planning and your free will actions. And so you're the creator of your own reality in a way, and you can't blame anyone else for what's happened. And so, and then if bad things happen to you or you're unhappy, you have to realize that everything that happens to you, there's a lesson to be learned or some experience that you needed to have. And if you look at it that way, then you go through life saying, okay, the glass is really half full. Everything I encounter, it's a half full glass, not a half empty glass. And so it just makes your journey so much more enriched, and you just have a better time.
I totally agree. I find a lot of people really focus on the negative sides of life, or they get really focused on, oh, this is karma. No, this is actually, you know, the consequences or the actions to something that you've done, and it's just an experience that you're having as a result of something you did. The other thing I encourage people to do is really ask themselves that tough question, what do I want? Because in that moment, we're allowing spirit to come through and speak to us. And because a lot of times people are just asking for change, you know, and when I suggest people to ask, you know, what do you want? You know, I find it's a difficult question for them to answer. What do you think about that?
Yeah, a lot of people are in the same boat in terms of, like, you know, I'm not happy with what I'm doing, but I'm not sure where I should go. And you're right, asking the question, what do I want? Spirit will try its best. Your guides will try their best to try to answer your questions, and it may not be an immediate answer, but it may come several days later. But you have to sort of be, you know, waiting for it and try to hear what they're saying. And of course, what you really want, your soul really wants, is for you to get back on track if you're off track.
Yeah,
and
totally.
So they're trying to steer you back on track, and to the extent you're on track, as I said, you'll feel more balanced and happier with your life. And if you're off track and you've taken a wrong path, it may feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall. And if it ever feels like that, then you should just realize you have to sort of back up and take another route, because you're obviously off course. And so that's what you really have to focus on. And it's not easy, because those messages are, as I said, are very subtle. And you have to sort of listen very carefully.
Yeah, I always encourage people to really pay attention to what their body's response is, because, you know, you've got to make that, you know, body, mind, and spirit connection, because, you know, we've chosen this vessel to walk around in, and it is quite intuitive all on its own. And, you know, it's just as simple as, you know, you pick up something in the grocery store and immediately you'll get this sense of guilt or, you know, excitement about whatever it is you've picked up. It's the same thing with direction in life. If we were actually in tune with, you know, life and spirit and just being willing to, you know, listen to those subdue nudges, our mission would be a lot easier, because we wouldn't be complicating it by being human and getting in the way.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is that Earth is a very tough school. Albert said it's one of the toughest ones in the universe, and so realize that for everyone who's listening, and for you and I, Albert said all humans should give themselves a pat on the back, because it took a lot of courage to come to this planet and incarnate here, because there's a whole lot of other planets, millions and millions of different life forms in the universe that we could have incarnated into, which are a whole lot easier. And so we've chosen a very tough one. So, you know, kudos to all of us for being here. That doesn't help us, when you're stuck here and in the middle of a life and you're trying to figure your way out and figure out what you should be doing. But it's good to know that, this is a tough school, was intended to be tough, and it has a lot of challenges.
Absolutely. It's like the Harvard of, humans.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And, so it's been really great having you. So where can people find your books?
Well, a lot of bricks and mortar stores carry it, and if your favorite store doesn't, they can order it for you. And all the online stores have it. And if you go to my website, which is garnetschulhauser.com, or you can get to it by doing dancingonastamp.com. And on my website, I have a bunch of online bookstore buy links. You just have to click on there, and you get right to the site where my books are, and you can buy it online. The other reason for visiting my website is that you can click onto all of my social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Google Plus to see what's happening there. There's also you can download a free excerpt from each book from my website. You can watch a book video, and there's a whole lot of other information, including my upcoming events and other interesting pieces of information. So I encourage everyone to visit my website.
Yes, I do too. And because you have an amazing message. And so when is your next book due out?
Well, it's in the process of being published, Maryne, and my publisher tells me probably early 2016 it will be out and released. Okay. And the name of that book is Dance of Heavenly Bliss.
Oh, I can't wait. And
it's another series of astral travels with Albert. This time he takes me to different places and I meet different people, and it's all I'm very quite excited about it because I think it's the best of all three of them. And so I'm really eager to have it released, and hopefully people will buy it and read it.
I think people will buy it and read it, and if they haven't yet, bought your other ones, I really strongly suggest that you do. I've been blessed, with having both of them. So thank you so much for that lovely gift. And thank you for being on Spiritually Speaking today.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed every minute of it, Maryne.
Yes, me too. And I hope to stay in touch with you.
Let's do that, please.
Okay. Awesome. So is there anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't covered today?
No, I think I think that I'd encourage people to read my books because the summary of what Albert has told me is a very brief summary today. Time doesn't allow us to get into detail, but Albert has said some very amazing things in both books. I've seen some things that really give you pause for thought, and so I would encourage people to read them, and then you'll get the full picture. Because this short 1 hour interview doesn't really give us enough time to get into detail into every aspect of what Albert has told me. So
exactly, and it's so for everybody listening, you could pass an Albert on your way to work, and so. Try not to, turn your nose up because we could be entertaining angels and spirit guides. You just never know. It's a good lesson for us all.
That's very true because they can show up in anywhere wearing any kind of disguise. So I certainly look at homeless people way differently than I did before I met Albert, Maryne, as you can imagine. Not all of them are spirit guides or angels, but they are humans and they're souls just like us, and they deserve dignity and respect like everyone else. So that's one of the main effects on my life after meeting Albert is that I look at everyone, including animals, much differently. And realize that we're all just souls on a journey, and that it's not appropriate to judge other people because you don't know where they've been or where they're going. And so that's just a good outlook to have on life.
Completely agree with you. Thank you once again. You're listening to Maryne Hachey on Spiritually Speaking. If you would like to book a session with me, you could contact me at www.marynehachey.com. or email me at readingsbymaryne@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to Spiritually Speaking. I'm your host, Maryne Hachey.
Thank you for listening to Spiritually Speaking with your host, Maryne Hachey, a transformative hour devoted to assist you with overcoming obstacles by channeled messages from your spirit guides, God, the angelic realm, and loved ones crossed over. For more information, go to marynehachey.com. That's Maryne, Maryne, Hachey, HACHEY.com.